So wonderful, KitchenAid Part 2. This one is a bit more, not quite as good a state as the other ones, which makes it a great candidate to walk you through the individual parts and to talk about a bit about typical defects and how to rant a bit about the prices for spare parts, because that's criminal. So this is the base of KitchenAid. Pretty much what it says. Without it, the thing would not be suspended in the sky, but would fall down, so you really need it. This is the base plate. This is where the bowl goes, and you can see it has these cams and with corresponding parts in the bowl. So you put the bowl in, rotate it a bit, and the cams here go into the locks there, and then the bowl fits.
Oh, so it's
one problem that happens rather often is that the bowl gets stuck. It's a very funny video which indeed I just watched from a woman who asked KitchenAid what they recommend when the bowl gets stuck. They recommend hot compresses, so the thing expands a little, so the bowl can be taken out lightly, or hitting it with a rubber mallet, or sitting on top of the machine and wriggling the.
That's what KitchenAid said.
That's what KitchenAid says. Yeah. Don't do it. These machines are not built to carry human beings' weight. Okay, that's the base plate, so to speak. This is a tilted machine. So this goes in here. And one typical defect here is that the pin that holds this part to this part comes out. Just hit it with a hammer and go back in. It's no biggie. This is a screw that can be used to see how regulate how much the attachment comes forward. The idea is there's something called the dyno test. You put the coin in the bowl and put the head down. And your attachment, your pedal, mixer, or whatever, is supposed to lightly raise the coin at the bottom of this bowl, but not to move it around. You can regulate the screw until this fits. I have never done this, but apparently it's a thing on YouTube. So, and this is an important bit. This is part of the Planetary Gear. So, Planetary Gear is basically where the magic happens. So, what is the magic of a KitchenAid mixer, by the way? Excursion. What do you call it? How do you call it? Excurse?
It's
Yeah. No.
You got me there. Sorry.
So to go a bit off track, KitchenAid mixers are built to knead dough. That was the original purpose. Somebody at Hobart saw people kneading dough and saw that it was a lot of work and thought, hey, that's what the machine can do. Kneading dough helps with the development of gluten. Gluten is a complex protein, or a mix of complex proteins, in products made from certain grains, like wheat. In about 1% of the population that's unhappy enough to suffer from celiac disease, gluten causes very severe symptoms. In about 49% of the population that spends too much time on social media, gluten causes hysteria. Gluten is probably good for you unless you have celiac.
Like glucose intolerant, right? Unless you've, because that was a big thing in the last 10 years, I think, all these gluten-free products.
Yes, if you are on a gluten-free diet and you see health effects, then it's probably because you eat less. Because gluten is basically everywhere. If you avoid gluten, then you will be eating less, and given that overeating is a huge problem, eating less will, for most people, have health effects. So, that's the thing. But this is what the KitchenAid does, or what it was invented for, to knead dough so that gluten forms. Gluten is a protein. It makes the dough more elastic. So when dough rises in, for example, bread, it's usually due to gas. If you have yeast, it expels CO2. And if the dough is elastic, then the CO2 can form bubbles, and this makes the dough rise. And since gluten is a protein, it coagulates when it gets hot, so the bubbles stay even after the heat is gone.
That's why bread has holes in it, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's why cake is usually more crumbly, because cake uses baking powder. And it's, most cakes, and it's chemical agent. It also releases a gas, but it dissipates very quickly. It does not form bubbles. So, how does this work? Yes, this is the main shaft. This is coming through from the gears above. Goes in here. So, and this drives this whole assembly, goes in a circle. However, in addition to that, you have this little pinion gear, which sits here, and which moves around this serrated surface, around this main gear that's called a planetary gear. So, and the effect is that you have a double motion, both all this thing rotates and the attachment itself also rotates. This creates a figure which, as a German idiom, is called a Bäckeracht. I'm not sure what this would be in English, no idea. But it basically means that you have a double motion, which is very effective for kneading dough. Also, it takes a while. When I first used a KitchenAid mixer, I was a bit puzzled because it took so long until all the flour was picked up and incorporated. But that's actually good, because kneading slower but longer helps with gluten development, which, as I mentioned, is the thing after. This is just the gasket that sits here, because there's a lot of grease in there usually, and so that it doesn't spill out. There's this gasket thing. So this assembly is actually all of the gears that are in the KitchenAid. And how it works is, this is a warm gear. This grabs into here. And when it turns around, it turns this yellow thing. This is a sacrificial gear that protects the motor. If your mixer gets stuck, then this will ideally break, and your motor won't get stuck and won't overheat. So it will not break. So the motor drives this. This drives this little other pinion gear here. And this goes into the main gear, and the main gear drives the shaft, which goes into the planetary. And since we do not also have only have these attachments at the bottom here, the whisks and dough hooks, etc., but also pasta makers or whatever else goes into here, the attachment hub. You also have this gear, goes in here. And if this rotates, it drives this gear.
Okay, it drives the attachment.
This moves, and here's the square hole. And the attachments have a square so that fits in there.
And what kind of attachments are there? You said a pasta maker?
It's a pasta maker and vegetable slicer and meat processing machine, which is often used to meat, as a vegetarian.
Well, no, I wish you did soy meat.
They exist in many different qualities, I have to say. I have a few very nice old American style attachments, which are metal and good quality. I have also a few of the newer ones, which are plastic and rather light.
And are they KitchenAid attachments, or can you get third-party attachments?
You can get third-party.
Do you recommend that, or do you?
I mean, quality from Roku is pretty shit, so you might as well buy a cheaper one. Unless you can get a good quality in old style. I mean, we can actually do a video about attachments. Because
that would be quite interesting. I'm curious as to what you can.
This was the mechanical part. This is okay. This is electrical. There's not much electronic parts in here. These parts are basically all the speed control, except that's an RFI filter. This is something American machines do not have for some reason. This is just so that your KitchenAid will not interfere with other electrical devices in the household. Okay, this is what we call the speed control plate. This is a series of metal latches, and you can open them or close them so that current goes through. In the default position of the machine, this little lever grabs into here and opens this, so the machine is off. If you pull it back, then this closes, and current goes, and the machine runs. So up to a point, because you have different speeds. And speed is controlled partly by this thing. This is called a governor.
The governor?
Yeah. This is a very common, almost every household appliance that has a rotating part has a governor, washing machines and dishwashers and stuff. This sits on the shaft of the motor. And as the motor spins up, centrifugal force, don't discuss with me if centrifugal forces are actually forces, but as the motor spins, this travels up, and then it pushes against this plate here, and then it opens the contact here, which means no current is flowing, which means the motor will be shut off. So that's the way it regulates speed, because once the motor slows down, this travels back down the shaft, and the contact closes, and the motor spins up again. So this is basically the built-in speed control. So that this doesn't happen quite so abruptly. There's this very little piece of electronic that shuts off. It seems that the current is not shut off immediately, but that it slows down and spins up softly. So when a KitchenAid has 10 speeds, and to regulate when the governor hits the speed control plate to shut the motor off, this plate is actually movable. This goes in here somehow. Oops. And here is the lever attached. So if you pull this back or move it forward, then the plate will be closer or farther apart from the governor, which means it will hit sooner or later, which will speed. Oh, no, look, now I broke it, because by default it should be. It was broken before, so I'm not worried. By default, it should be closed. If you want to buy a broken machine and fix it yourself, and the person who sells it says the machine won't shut off, then this is probably the reason. Because this machine, no, sorry. If this lever is worn down, then this is always closed, and the machine won't shut off. If the machine will not turn on, then this is the reason that one of the latches is broken.
And they're like the common reasons, right?
Yeah, that's a broken speed control plate is a common thing. That this is broken is a common thing. This is one of the more fixable things. This will cost you €12 about. And you will have to disassemble most of the machine if you're not worried about that. This is usually, I think, around 50. But sometimes you can find offers at Amazon. I paid 40, I think, for the both of them. This is a gasket. It sits at the back of the machine. It's not a proper gasket. It doesn't hold. There are no liquids or anything to hold out. It's mostly against dust.
What's material is that? Is that leather?
No, that's corrugated cardboard.
Okay.
And this is €18 for a piece of cardboard. It does an absolutely lousy job at keeping dust out, which is a good thing, because it would be keeping the dust out, it would be keeping the heat in, and then the motor would fly. So, yay. Right. Speaking of annoying prices, this is something American machines do not have. This is due to some European Union regulation, and this is called a headlock. It sits here, and if you tilt the head back, then it will rest on this little plastic piece. And since this means you will smash the full weight of the motor into this piece every time you tilt back the motor, this is broken on virtually every machine I have yet found.
Right.
And this is €18.
€18?
a part that is guaranteed to break, and that's actually not needed for anything.
The Americans ones don't even have it, right?
No, I should. Like I said, it's not necessary. Like probably some health and safety thing. So, this is also a part that's technically not necessary. The US do not have that. I'm not sure if this is due to their different voltages or if they are just not worried about electric interference. So this is the most expensive part of the
Yeah, this looks interesting.
replacement kit is about 150 euros, I think. This is a motor. This is called the universal motor. This is a motor with brushes. They are made from graphite because this is a conductor. Okay. The brushes actually sit in little brush holders, and they are connected here so that they receive current. By the way, these are 5 euros. If somebody says his machine will not turn on, then probably the brushes are worn down because without them the motor will not run. They needed to close the circuit. Or if they have replaced the brushes, they might have inserted them incorrectly because they have this little edge here and the brush holder, which is this part in here. It goes in there. This is made to fit this little edge, and if it will fit in incorrectly, but then it will not make contact with the motor, and then the motor will not run. So you have to make sure. That's how I got this machine. I'm not quite sure if it's working correctly, but when I got it, it wasn't. Oh, not this one. This one. When I got this, it wasn't working at all. But when I took out the brushes and inserted them correctly, it suddenly was running, so there was no big issue. So, how does this work? Okay, this is the part of the motor that stays still. It's called a stator. This is the part of the motor that moves. In German, it's sometimes called a rotor because it rotates. The proper English term is, I think, armature. So this is just the bearing so that it can rotate. This is the worm gear that goes into there. And this works because the whole thing is rotating. But why is it rotating? So you can see this here, this is not a continuous piece. There are a lot of little bars. They're called commutator bars. And I'm not sure if you can see this. The commutators are wired to the windings back here. And as I already mentioned, those windings look like they touch each other, but this is an insulated wire, so these are independent windings. So, and they are wired in a way that the two opposite bars go into the same winding. So, what happens now? What happens is that you have these two brushes. They are connected to the brush holders, which means the current is going through. And they touch the opposite commutator bars. And then the current is flowing into the windings. And if you apply current to a copper winding, then you have a magnet. So here you have a second magnet, because also current going in. Which means, there are probably magnetic monopoles somewhere, but all magnets we know of have two poles and opposite poles attract. So if this becomes a magnet, and this is a magnet, then the opposite poles will attract, and this will rotate to align with this magnet. If that would happen only once, then it would just be locked into one position. This is why these are not continuous pieces, because if this rotates away, it will break the contact with this commutator bar, and it will move and it will make contact with the next, and then the next pair of windings will be magnetized and it will move on and move on and move on. That's how a motor works. And this is very simple and very clever, and gives you terrible dirty fingers if you do not take care. So, and this is basically everything that's in
I have a question. So you have a number of KitchenAids. What extra parts would be in What makes them different? Because this KitchenAid is a classic or a
This was an ultra power.
ultra power.
Actually, the names do not mean a lot. What is really relevant is this model number, because this one is an ultra power and this is an artisan, and they are identical in every way.
Okay.
So it just doesn't mean a lot. If you want to know anything useful about your machine, then
There's the number.
you look at the number. Here you can confirm that it's actually a European machine. On the American machine, it says 110 volt.
Okay.
And this is the output, and this reminds you that the motor is not supposed to run for more than 10 minutes because else it will probably fry. What makes these machines different?
Yeah, like what would be in another?
Mostly this, because actually this is a 275, this is a 300 and a 315 and a 350 watt, but the rotating part is the same in all these machines. So this is the difference.
Okay.
The heavy duties are somewhat larger machines. I mean, they are power lifters. But other than that, nothing really.
You find this is what you can expect.
There's a lot of marketing. They are annoying to assemble because there are washers and screws in different positions. If you're looking for buying advice, then this is what I would buy, because this is the most pleasant to work with, because it doesn't wobble or anything, but it's also one of the more expensive options. I would not buy a classic because the motor is a bit weak.
Okay.
Something like this, an artisan. But like I said, I would prefer what I really would prefer is this one also exists in a professional version, because when you're a private citizen, you are free to stick your fingers in and lose them. But if you work in a professional area, then there are labor laws against it, and so the professional versions have a metal handguard. So
I see.
grab in, and they have an emergency stop, a big red button.
Right.
And some of them even have a shut off, so that the motor shuts off when the bowl is down. So, but since all our machines are used ones that were broken, the more expensive machines are not usually sold; they are repaired. So the chances of getting a pro machine are pretty slim.
So, well, thank you for showing us the internal workings.
That's pretty much it.
What can we look forward to in the next video?
I realized I forgot a few parts like this, but this is just the back of the motor, because this needs to rest somewhere, so there's no unstable. Well, we could do KitchenAid attachments.
Yeah, that would be quite interesting. Yeah. All right. Well, look out for that.
It's also a nice opportunity to use a few fingers.
Yes. Well, we won't be losing any fingers.
Why not? It would be interesting.
Okay. All right. All right. Well, there we go. Thank you very much.
Very little in there, actually.
Yeah, no, I'm surprised that I thought there'd be a lot more in there, but I guess that's the secret to their success: simple and effective.
It's actually. I mean, I compared this to Apple previously, and it's really a similar idea. Someone had a very clever idea, and the company that owns the patent now sells slight variations of the idea at increasingly higher prices. So.
Yeah.
What can you say? I think that's it.
Okay. Thank you, Eike.